Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we are going to be discussing about a great topic, which is cooperatives, capitalism, which is the third industrial revolution and a general movement that has been growing around the world, wherein upon witnessing that capitalism as it currently operates is not really working for everyone, there's massive inequality, there is a growing community of people that organize locally and decide to take part of actually managing and collectively owning their own either grocery stores or any other form of business, that they will democratically organize themselves to make decisions in it, run it themselves, and ensure that the profits are distributed inequality, which is a part of what we, of course, advocate within the Living Income Guaranteed proposal. So to discuss more about this and the movement specifically going on in the US and other facts around the world, we have Jeanne Kenney from New York. Hello, Jeanne.
Hi.
And we have Tess from Milwaukee in the US as well. Tess Kenney, welcome to the Hangout. Thanks for being here.
Yes, Tess is my sister-in-law, so we have a connection.
We share a common last name.
Yes, and I'm very glad to have you here. And also, I have to remind our viewers that there will be questions and comments available throughout the Hangout, which will last around 40 minutes, a bit more maybe. So make sure that you get your question throughout that time frame. So, Jeanne, let's first of all jump into the topic. What are cooperatives? Can you give us a little background on them?
Okay, cooperatives have been around for a long time, and you could even actually go back to the American Indians who lived, the Iroquois Nation are a good example of tribes that lived in cooperative economic parity with one another. In the modern era, it began with a man named Robert Owen in England after the Industrial Revolution, where there were a lot of displaced workers. He was one of the fathers or founders of the cooperative movement, which was a way that businesses could operate in a way that would serve, enrich the whole of society. And what we have now is there's modern examples of it throughout the world. And the question is, how do we balance the business operations in a world where business is always seen as authoritarian, and make it more of a balance so that business is profitable for everybody and enriches the whole of society. And one of the misperceptions about cooperative businesses is that they're part of a socialist agenda, or they're going to somehow become part of a oligarchy. And in fact, worker cooperatives in a sense are really private ownership. So each company belongs to the members of the cooperative. And in that sense, they're closer to capitalism than they are to socialism. In a pure socialist country, everything would be controlled by the government. In a cooperative, they are controlled by the members, and this is like a defining difference between them. So the model is closer to capitalism, as there's no rules that prohibit cooperatives from making revenue, from making profit, from sharing that profit. And the cooperative is really just a simpler form of a stock company. So in a stock company, the profits are, so the point is that the profits are shared among however the people in it decide to delineate that.
And what about corporate democracy or decision-making by its members? How does that operate in a cooperative?
Well, in a cooperative, there's many ways that can happen, and it can be through an elected board of directors. You can have elected managers. You can have management job roles. You can have no management at all. You can have one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. You can have a delegation that you've decided to make your decisions. You can have, as I said, consensus. But the core values in a cooperative remain the same, which is self-empowerment, democracy, inequality, fairness, unity. These are the basic principles that the ownership control and the benefits, the underlying core value is that the benefits belong to the members, and in turn, hopefully, spread out to society as a whole. Sorry, just
So in terms of your cooperative, Tess, can you share with us where is it located, what is it based on, and the basic proposal that you have with it, meaning what is the intent that you have created for it?
Well, a good way to describe our intent is to tell you what our tagline is. It's the Riverwest Grocery, Riverwest Cooperative Grocery and Cafe, food for people, not for profit. And so while I know that we're trying to look at ways that we can make profit, we do pay all of our employees, and we do share all of our profits. But for the most part, I would say, yeah, we are definitely an interesting Midwest cooperative. We're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in a neighborhood that's called Riverwest. It's a long neighborhood. It's got about 12,000 residents with a lower, it's a fairly low income neighborhood, and it's quite diverse.
And tell us more about the membership process. How did you come about with it, or how have you organized with other people in such a neighborhood to make it happen?
Well, it started in 1999 through a group of neighbors that wanted to get organic food into the neighborhood at a reasonable price, and so they started a buying club. And back in those days, when you would buy food, the way it would work is that you could make an order without any money, and then you would pay them once the food was delivered. I don't think it works quite like that anymore. But through that group, we realized that we really had a need, because as more and more people got involved and more people wanted to have this food delivered, we realized that maybe we needed a store. So the idea was to find a space, find a building that we could get a store going. And we did that through a lot of fundraising. We had spaghetti dinners, we had rock concerts, there were all kinds of ways. And through that, we then purchased a building, which a group of people purchased, and then leased to the actual cooperative, because the cooperative couldn't afford it at that time, for $1 a month, I believe. And our membership costs have not changed so by 2001 we actually opened the store. So it took about 2 years. This was not, wasn't ready to be a store. It was an old building. It needed a lot of rehab. And I will say that there's a lot of sweat equity that were on many others' backs that are no longer, moved out of the neighborhood or not here anymore, that the present members definitely enjoy. And so, but I don't think that bothered those people. I really believe, and I actually, prior to this interview, talked to a couple of the original members from 1999 and said, what was your outlook? And they said, well, we didn't think we were really going to succeed. And so the fact that we've still been going, and here we are in 2015, and running a fairly successful cooperative is pretty fantastic.
Awesome. So, Jeanne, can you tell us more about these membership-based organizations and what do they create at a social level and benefits?
One of the things that I got interested in was a book called Economics of the User's Guide by a man named Hao Jun Chang. He teaches at Cambridge, and one of the things that he notes about cooperatives is that they don't define and communicate well enough what they stand for. In other words, do they just serve their members, or do they serve the wider social purpose? And I think from Tess's story, we can use Milwaukee Riverwest area, which is a very low-income, mixed background of people, as a microcosm of what's the social impact that a small co-op, even just a food co-op, can have and develop into, which is it's developed into other ideas and other co-ops. And so it's like there's a vast ripple effect, and what he's saying is that people in general aren't aware of these co-ops. They're all over the world. They're being funded and started up in Argentina and Spain, Italy, all over the world. People are joining together to do this, and how they differentiate from normal capital businesses in one sense is that normal capital corporations in our current society are more focused on short-termism. Everything has to be turned over. Revenue has to be shown every year. Stocks have to go up. Revenue has to come back to the stockholders. In a cooperative, we're looking at a long-term, life-sustaining project. So that is one of the huge differentiations. The balance of what we need in terms of profit versus the short-term impatient capital is at the root of the problem. Shareholders, in a sense, don't care about the company. They're not involved. They ruin a company by not investing sometimes, or demoralizing the workers, or keeping them, destroying, using subcontractors or offshore workers. So this is the kind of problem that is a perception problem. I think if most people knew how well cooperatives could fit into capitalism, and then also give back to society so that everyone has a share and is benefited, that they would become more popular and more viable to pursue.
Yes, part of this, the intent of this hangout is precisely to share living examples of how this operates and the benefits that come with it. Certainly in our mainstream media, we don't get this kind of stories, or we don't get to hear even of the names of the many cooperatives that are quite successful around the world. So Tess, from what Jeanne just explained, in relation to the management process, and even if you want to call it something different other than management, how does that operate in your cooperative?
Well, we have a board of directors that's voted on by the members at our annual meeting, and any member can run for that board of directors. So that's, and the board of directors definitely oversees any of our capital expenses, our hiring practices, I mean, pretty much everything. So there is a representative model in terms of how people vote for what happens. But those people are voted by anyone that is a member. Our membership is structured in such a way that people who can't afford to be members can still be members. So in other words, and our membership price is very low. It's $20 a year, and it's $100 for a lifetime membership. So once you've paid that, you don't pay any more. And if you don't have the money, the $20 extra in your budget to be a member, you can volunteer at our co-op and then get membership rights and also membership discounts on everything that you buy in the grocery store. So in terms of how we work, then through the board, we do have managers of the two different areas of the co-op, which are the grocery store and the cafe. And then we have a workers' collective. So the workers' collective meets every week, and every worker is invited to come. And they also make joint decisions, so it's not like the managers are dictating what's going to happen.
So it's shared decision-making processes, which is one of the basic tenets of all cooperatives. And I find it so meaningful because it goes very well along with what we propose in the Living Income Guaranteed proposal in terms of direct democracy and these direct inputs that we can all place in our workplace or any other endeavor that we have in terms of creating a social benefit in this case. So Jeanne, can you tell us more about the cooperatives in terms of the worldwide movement, examples from the various countries?
Well, in Spain, for example, Mondragon is one of the largest cooperatives in Spain. It's a 50-year-old network of cooperative businesses with 84,000 employees and $25 billion in revenue a year. Spain, as you know, probably is the worst. It's in the worst economic plight that it's been in probably for since the 1930s. But this area of Spain has the lowest unemployment. And within that, they expect their co-op members to contribute 10% of the profit towards mutual solidarity. So they go around and try to fund other companies, other cooperatives to start. And I would say, Argentina too has a 5% levy that they apply to co-ops to support the development of other co-ops. So this is part of the general trend, which is that, co-ops like Lego Co-op, which is in Italy, which has 15,000 members and has a revenue of over 56 billion euros a year. They have 8.5 million members. So these are huge, cooperatives. They contribute 3% of their profit to fund other development and to help other cooperatives. So that's the good news, is that this is happening around the world. One of the biggest problems is this funding, finding access to worldwide funding for these kinds of projects and getting loans, especially here in the United States, for such projects. So many countries like Argentina and Spain or whatever, they have tax incentives for the existing cooperatives so that they can fund those new cooperatives. And many of them have membership requirements that a percentage of this profit goes to this co-op development. No profit, no contribution is what they call it. So that's very cool. And I think the challenge for cooperatives is how do you continue to run large egalitarian organizations in a capitalist economy? So it's the job of all of us, and especially those directly involved, is how do you work within a system that's primarily non-democratic, non-egalitarian within capitalism, and sort of change that around so it's a win-win for everybody.
So Tess, with regards to this funding process, you were mentioning that there is actually an organization that you are planning on or creating already in relation to creating a fund for other people that want to start other cooperatives. How does that operate?
Well, what has happened is through the Riverwest grocery store and cafe, we ended up starting another cooperative that was a bar. And this one is called the Public House, the Riverwest Public House. And there's also another bookstore and an investment corporation that also is a cooperative. And these are all within a 5-block radius of each other in the neighborhood. And through that, what we realized is that we wanted to, open the doors for more people to have cooperative experiences. And so we started the Riverwest Cooperative Alliance. And the Alliance has a fair, and they also have study sessions at the bar on a regular basis, and they have a fair that's held every other year called Co-op Fest. And through that, we educate people. We have, Co-ops 101. We bring in speakers from co-ops throughout Wisconsin that come and talk about their experiences, and to try to help people get on board. Our goal is to, create a funding source for new co-ops so that we can, seed them and help them with finding monies to start their own cooperatives. And we actually, have been quite welcomed by the city, and we have 2 wonderful older people that live in the kind of 2 adjoining neighborhoods where all this is happening that are very interested, and they're working on some city strategies right now regarding how they're funding new businesses, and we're definitely, being the squeaky wheel with trying to see where we can fit into that picture, because when we saw their mission statement, they hadn't mentioned cooperatives directly, and so we were really quite concerned about that, and we're hoping to move things in that direction.
Which is really surprising when you consider that in the United States, 500,000 Americans are actively involved in cooperatives right now, so that's more than $15 billion annual revenue. But Tess, it would be fun too to hear about the bar and to.
Yeah, I'm also curious about that, because you were mentioning that you actually organize study groups and stuff like that. Like a bar, it doesn't really.
Yeah. This is awesome. This bar is really amazing. It's so different than any bar you've probably ever been in. There's a printers cooperative called Just Seeds, and these are printmakers, and they're from around the country, and several of them are located here in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, and in our neighborhood. And so through that cooperative, along with the Bar Cooperative and the other cooperatives, they have workshops on all kinds of ideas and subject matter. I mean, we've been talking about everything from Ukraine to LGBTQ rights and and cooperatives in those respects, and just I mean, you name it. And so we have these we call them night school, and of course, and then we used to have Sunday ale with one of the pastors in one of the Lutheran churches came in, and I mean, we just everybody's involved, and that's what's so amazing about the diversity of this neighborhood, that the Public House has definitely been, again, just like the idea of the market, a place for interchange of ideas.
And this development that you started in 1999, you said it started the co-ops and things, has actually gentrified the neighborhood and caused real estate prices to come up, and there's more money coming into the neighborhood, and it's actually created a ripple effect. Can you talk a little bit about the ripple effect from even just having a food co-op?
Well, that definitely has happened. We've really tried to encourage home ownership in our neighborhood as much as possible, rather than landlords, because of the idea of those rent increases. And that's definitely something that we're concerned about, is to pricing people out of the neighborhood. But at the same time, it's helped. It's helped with just visibility. It's a lively,
Services.
cooperatives are lively places where people are moving around and they don't look abandoned, and you can see that there's people are attending to, through the food movement alone. We've noticed that, and I think we've helped quite a bit to encourage this idea of healthy food through having this community grocery store. And so there's been many homes that have been raised due to foreclosures and absentee landlords and all this other stuff. And so those areas we've created an urban ag relationship and ordinance with the city to develop these into community gardens. And so we've got one of the largest areas of community gardens in the city. We actually have one whole acre in the northern part of Harambee, run by a group called Victory Garden Initiative. That's like a cooperative farm with neighbors that live around that part of the city, like that part of the neighborhood. So I think that the impact, in terms of capital is more than just a financial impact. I think it's a health and well-being, as well as just like the whole idea of creating healthy community.
Absolutely. It's like a life injection into capitalism. That's how I would say it sounds like. So, Jeanne, can you tell us a bit more of why do we say that cooperatives are a way to fix capitalism?
Co-ops are a way to build movements for social and economic justice, social change, so that there's a leveling of equity, so that people can have, as Tess has attested to, families that didn't have food have access to food at a fair and reasonable price. They get places where they can learn how to make food, they have support. So that's real democracy on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we're talking about, the living income, how to make sure everybody has a living day-to-day, basis for living a decent life. And that's the model, this cooperative model, where we're all involved with each other's lives, where we know who we are, we know who our neighbors are. That's empowerment that can build the change that we envision. It's democratizing ownership so that we don't just go to a job and just give all of our energy and ideas to a company and get nothing back except a paycheck, which in itself, okay, it can buy us food perhaps, but it doesn't give us a sense of community. It doesn't give us a sense of building a world that takes into consideration what are the resources we're using, how do we protect our environment, how do we ensure that we have a life that we want to pass on to the next generation. So it's a matter of a right. It's almost, I love the Alaska Permanent Fund as an example. People that live in Alaska, the incredible place with incredible resources, they get a benefit every year, a dividend. It may only be $1,500 a year, but it's a lot for a lot of people. If you have every citizen of Alaska, that's a matter of right. And we would say in the living income that it's a matter of right that we have access to food and decent home and shelter and education. So this would be the first, it's a demonstration of how viable it is and how much fun it is, actually, it sounds like.
Like very rewarding as well.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention the example of Marina Layla, which is in Spain, a village or a municipality in Sevilla, Spain. And it's a very interesting process that they've actually gone through in relation to actually taking a factory or a cooperative from the land that was even owned by the royalty. So by a law that enabled them to expropriate that land and property, they were able to found this cooperative that sells olive oil and other horticulture products. And they have an entire society completely involved, not only in this cooperative, but in a complete social democratic movement and organization as a municipality in itself, which means that they're really also having to stand with the processes that also apply based on them being a part of Spain, in terms of the EU and creating that sort of resistance at the moment. But what we see is that this kind of movements shouldn't be some kind of black sheep type of communities, but rather the way that we can change our laws to precisely fund them and support them so that these kind of relocalization movements become the new way to live capitalism, and not so much being a resistance against the government, but that the government in itself acknowledges this as the most viable way to continue injecting life into capitalism. So we have a comment from Cerise Pullman. She's saying, thanks, ladies. This is a very practical and relevant topic to the current state of our societies. And thank you for that. I fully agree on that. So, Tess, in terms of the social benefits that you've witnessed with the effect of your cooperative around your neighborhood, can you share us more about that and the educational processes that you also implement?
Well, I think one of the things that's extremely important is the fact that we have to look at when you spend money in any group, like if you go to a big box store and you spend money, every dollar that you spend, you're going to get a very small percentage of that dollar that's going to filter back into your community. So you're looking at, what is it, I think the statistics are something like 12 cents on the dollar. Where if you spend locally in your community, you go to the local grocery store, you go to a local restaurant that hires local people, you're looking at something like 69 cents on the dollar that's going to be returned back to your community. So when you think about the economic benefits of a cooperative that's owned by people who live and work in the community, and by keeping that money local, you're not only just talking about the carbon footprint of, you know, like in our case, having local food that's not been shipped from thousands and thousands of miles away, and all of these other things, you know, the health of that food, but you're also looking at an economic benefit for other businesses that are not even cooperatively owned, because those workers then can spend that money in those businesses in that neighborhood.
It's like a complete reinsertion of the same capital back into the community. So this is also a very important way to counteract the multinational corporations' infiltration into any city around the world and siphoning all of this profit out of the country, most of the times out of that community itself. So this is a way to not create resistance in itself, but simply ensure that you also vote and you also make a self-aware decision on how you spend your money, because I would definitely like to have that kind of option to buy locally and to support, as you were mentioning, the farmers from your community, and at the same time kind of creating a bond with like-minded people that are also becoming involved in maybe other projects. So which other projects are involved or are linked to this cooperative movement down there where you are?
Well, we have the bar, as I said. We have the bookstore. We have a Riverwest Investment Corporation, which is I believe it's $1,000 per share. And then that money goes into purchasing homes, and those homes are sometimes turned over and sold, or they're rented out to people at a reasonable rate. And then you can become part of that organization through sweat equity. So say, for example, you're a young family and you're a carpenter and you want to become part of this revenue sharing operation, you can do that by giving them some hours of time. So there's lots of different ways that the cooperatives have sort of evidenced themselves through this constant conversation. And that's one thing I would like to say, is that there is, you know, what ends up happening in this is this idea of empowerment. So as I said, we talked to the elder people about, you know, looking at us as a viable business model, and to help us with city funds as well. And so as a body, you know, no, we're not General Electric, but we actually are a somewhat powerful body of people. And I think that alone is one of the areas that people don't really necessarily connect with the idea of having a cooperative. So yes, I couldn't own this grocery store on my own, but you know what? I'm an owner, and I feel really good about that. And I know my voice counts, and it counts in a way that I know we've been talking a lot about democracy, but I kind of like to call it the theater of democracy, because democracy is just that. It's this changing experience, and each successive generation is going to kind of have to relive it and redefine it. And in this case, I think that this idea of consensus with regard to democracy, how do we come to consensus? How do we not be polarized? How do we work for our common good rather than having political polarization of saying that something like this would be left or would be right? It's really neither or. You know, it's really about consensus and working for the good of everybody that's a member in that group.
It's making businesses work in more of a shared ownership and shared responsibility type of model, wherein people acknowledge that there are ways to dignify their work, dignify themselves by being part of this kind of, not only a business that works well, but that has that intent to make a healthier society, which is awesome in terms of the principles behind all cooperatives. We have a question from Joku, and he's saying, what are some of the key barriers or challenges for this kind of movement to develop from the grassroots levels? Would it primarily be the lack of startup or seed money, or are there other factors as well that make this kind of model not yet accessible?
Would that be for me to answer?
Yes.
I would say the barriers are just for the cooperative model is this lack of consensus or territorialism. So if people can't get together and really try to understand each other and like look towards the common good, it's not always about money. Sometimes human agency is worth far more than money. I couldn't afford to have done all the work that needed to happen in that grocery store before it got started. But by the generous support of area electricians and carpenters and masons and tin workers and on, and people that just came to clean and remove junk and paint walls, all of those things happen, and at no cost other than for materials. And we chipped in for those materials or raised that money through benefits where people would go and, you know, enjoy some concert or food or whatever. And one of the first benefits we had was the spaghetti dinner. And I have to mention a lady by the name of Nancy Sense. And she was also one of the ladies who helped find the original building. And she, to this day, still donates spaghetti for the spaghetti dinner every year. So now that we're up to 3,000 members, you know, we don't have quite that many come to the annual meeting, but I mean, she's just an angel. And so really, this is about people believing in each other. That's the biggest drawback. If you cannot get along, if you really are territorial and you need to be that sole owner, then it's not going to work for you. But if you truly believe that you can be and create something that's bigger than you, and not worry about success, just worry about working together and doing it one step at a time, I really believe that you can really shoot for the moon.
And it actually becomes part of what really satisfies you to work in and be a part of, because most of the jobs that are currently in our system are meaningless, mechanical, automated type of jobs that you really don't feel like you're contributing back to society in a meaningful manner. So I'd say that from all the various accounts and testimonies from people working in cooperatives, it really does give you that sensation that really people feel empowered and at the same time dignified in relation to what they're doing and contributing to their society. So thank you very much for sharing that. We have also another comment from Bella B. She's saying, awesome discussion, well said for the common good. So, Jeanne, do you have some input on all of this?
I think the main thing I'd like to maybe summarize is just the idea of redefining what success is. And I think, you know, we grew up in the United States, and I always speak for myself, with a notion of success being singular and, you know, what I want to do, and not really focused on what is best for everyone and what's best for the community. But it's also to look at bottom line success of endeavors like a co-op, so that you look at not just the money that they make, which is fine and great, but their, you know, the contribution, as we've said, to the community and the happiness of the people that work there, the happiness quota. How can you put a monetary value on that? The longevity of the workers that work there, their sense of community and security. So all those intangible, non-monetary factors that contribute will come to, you know, this is a slow, you know, in such a strongly individualistic society such as ours, this is another way to look at success, and one that I think we need to embrace in order to find, happiness and fulfillment. We can't. We've shown ourselves that it's not going to ever be granted to us if we're only intent on our own happiness. So this is a great, venue and way for us to join and really form meaningful communities. So I think that's great, and I thank you and applaud you, Tess, for the work that you've done.
I fully agree on that, and also I'd like to also consider the change that it requires within ourselves as individuals to consider this as viable solutions. So that's why we're sharing the actual account of how it operates and the benefits. But there's also like a personal process that goes with it, Tess. So you've been doing this for quite some time in your life, how has this changed you as an individual, as a human being? What kind of principles you've integrated in your life from doing what you're doing?
Well, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of patience, and I think the ability to be more accepting of other people's ideas, and to wait, and to listen harder, and to really think about, why do I need to insert something here? Am I inserting it because I need to have to say it, or am I inserting it because it's really because I'm seeing something that might get us into trouble, and I want to make sure that the hive mind has access to that information too. And so you learn how to communicate on a much higher level with people, and really about the common good, and to understand that this isn't a perfect situation. It is, people are fallible, people make mistakes, and that happens on a regular basis. And so the idea of working together is, it's a constant and evolving process. I guess also I think that there's a quality of life issue that you cannot, you just can't compare it to something that you could purchase. Especially people who are elderly, or people who don't have large families, that kind of a situation. You become part of this bigger group, this sort of bigger family, if you will, of people that care about you and want to know what's happening in your life and stay connected to you, and you do it because you've pretty much been on the front lines with them, working to make this thing happen, this dream, and then it suddenly happens and it becomes successful. A really fun example is there's a big chili cook-off that happens every year at the Milwaukee School of Engineering. It's a large school in the Midwest. And it's a way that they support their radio station. And so we decided that we couldn't just have one of the chefs in the kitchen make the chili. We had to have a sort of a membership agreement on what the chili should be. So every year we have a pre-chili cook-off. So all the members are invited to make chili, and then we go to another bar that's in the area, and everyone brings their chili. And then we have a pepper eating contest and prizes, and then it only costs $5 to get in, and which is really a great price for a meal. And so we get a big attendance, and in fact, the chili cook-off, pre-chili cook-off, is tonight.
Oh, awesome! For anyone watching, they're invited, of course.
Yes, everyone watching, please come to Linneman's over on the corner of Fratney and Locust, and I'm sorry, Wheel and Locust, and then you can get in for $5 and eat all the chili you can stand.
And what about this co-op festival? Because you mentioned that it's an annual thing, so when
it's not an annual, it's every other year. We try to do it annually, but the other thing is, a lot of people have full-time jobs, and then they also are working part-time, volunteering part-time in some of these other ventures like the RCA. So there's this, kind of variable in terms of people's ability to get things done. But we had our first one in 2013. We're going to have our next one this summer. And we have a park that's, again, was an abandoned building space that was raised, and then it was a brownfield, and we had to fix it. And we turned it into what we call Gardener's Park, which is kind of interesting because it's this, we just started having farmers come there, and sort of a renegade farmers market, if you will. That's right next to the bar. And so then people are used to going there, and because of that, then it was a perfect place for us to do Co-op Fest because it's literally right next to the bar. So then people paid us a nominal amount of money, and we had different sites around Riverwest where we had workshops. And then in the park area, we had different co-ops with tents talking about what they've done. So you could go in there and talk with them and meet with them and do all kinds of stuff. We even had a canning co-op there last time. So it was just a group of women that sort of have a kind of undefined group, and they can every year together. They call themselves the Zagora Canning Co-op. So, and we had the Outpost Natural Foods, which is a very large grocery store cooperative in the city of Milwaukee, Mequon, and thereabout. They've already got 4 stores. They've been around since 1970s. So, you know, it was nice. I mean, we have good relationships with our other co-ops.
And what about volunteerism? Because it's a great part of how you also begin running a co-op, people volunteering to work. There's the notion or conception that if people are not going to be immediately remunerated in a sufficient manner, then no one will volunteer to work for it. So what has been your experience on this regard?
Well, our volunteers are varied. We have everybody from people who are retired to student service learners at the universities. We've got several universities that have service learning parts of their coursework, and community organizing majors and things like that. And so then they're calling us and sending us volunteers. We work with a couple of rehab places where people are coming out of prison and they need to get job skills, and so we have people like that working in our kitchens, helping us stock our shelves, and they're getting experience and getting you know, letters of recommendation through us. We have people who are in between jobs. You know, there's a lot of 30-somethings out there with master's degrees in art history, and they haven't been able to find something, and so they're trying, you know, and they've got time on their hands, and they have less money, you know, than they have time, and so they want to come in, and through the volunteerism, they get an increased discount then on their groceries and so forth. And anybody who works in the kitchen gets a free meal. That's always a given. So anything you want, you get. So you know, it's hard to just put you know, to put a monocle on our volunteers, because it's a real variety. And what I really like about our volunteers is a lot of them are just really interested about food issues. And so there's an educational component by working with us, because we've been doing it for so long, especially those that are working in the kitchen. You know, they're learning how to do things they never would have tried before. So they might not be vegan or vegetarian, but they've been thinking about really how to improve their diet. And they volunteer with us, and suddenly they're, you know, we're having long conversations about kale.
Or you were also mentioning the education that you provide also, or workshops maybe for people to learn how to eat and cook their own meals.
Well, for a while we were doing, working with some of the area schools, and so I would get, for example, you know, 25 third graders like jammed into the cafe, and I would be talking to them about what 2 cups of vegetables look like, and so I would smash down spinach 2 cup, you know, into a 2-cup container, and then I'd pour it out, and I'd say, here's 2 cups, let's see what it really looks like, and I'd pour it out onto a big platter, and it would, of course, you know, bloom out over the floor and everywhere. And they would just be like, wow, and that's how much vegetables you're supposed to eat every single day. And so we were doing that. We're doing educational things. We've done with schools. I've worked with mothers who are trying to teach their kids how to eat more healthy, and then they feel like they can't really get their kids to buy into a healthy diet. So there were groups where the mother and children, these would be toddler age, and I would have them actually make their food we would all make it together collectively, and then you would be amazed. You've got little kids eating tofu wraps and making smoothies and grating carrots and all kinds of stuff and enjoying them, where if you just set in front of them, there's no sense of ownership. So there's that. And then we'd like to do more education in terms of preserving food. So our goals are, I mean, we've talked about it for a long time, but you know, we would definitely like to see eventually a cooperative kitchen, a production kitchen, that we could have, that we could either sell things through to create income, and possibly have open community nights where people could come in with their produce from their community gardens and preserve it. So, you know, preserving tomatoes and jams and those kinds of things for the winter, making kimchi, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. So, Jeanne, how do you consider that we can run this kind of democratic and egalitarian type of organizations in a majorly like hardcore capitalist type of society? Are these two terms, in essence, mutually exclusive, or how can we make it a viable solution to actually introduce this kind of principles in many other places and businesses models?
Well, I don't really know that I can answer that definitively, but my instinct says that the best thing to do is to look at other models, what we're doing here, how they did it, see what other cities are doing it, other countries, and use those models as a, as our models for creating our own. I don't see that there has to be any conflict. It can be a parallel development. And I think ultimately, if there are enough people doing such work together, they will self-fulfill our prophecy that it is a better way to live. It'll become self-evident that this is a more sustaining way to live, that this is real democracy on a daily basis. And that kind of empowerment, where people feel empowered, all people from all different walks of life and various strata of education or whatever, that kind of empowerment that is shared would have long-lasting effect and ripple effect to other people. So I think to just go back to your question, maybe the first thing is to just educate yourself on how widespread this is worldwide. Like Argentina alone, in the last few years, 60, 70 companies have been taken back that were out of business. Worker control took them back. They just occupied the building. I mean, it doesn't have to be a confrontational system, but Argentina is a great example because they were so bankrupted by the bankers. They lost, so much of their infrastructure, and it got to the point where, the workers were the normal people who had jobs, good-paying jobs, became so frustrated that they just said, "What the hell? We'll just take over where we used to work, and take back our jobs." And it works, and it's shown to be successful. So I think that success is its own publicity for this sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it can run parallel. I don't think there's any conflict. I think profit is profit, and resources and management, can serve both interests.
Tess, can you clarify to us is it legally organized in terms of within the system? Is it a non-for-profit, for-profit? What's the definition?
It's in our situation, there's a couple of different ways to set up a corporation, and you can set up a 501c3, which would be a not-for-profit, which has very stringent rules around it, and then there's what's called a not-for-profit, which is basically you are making money, you have earned income, but then you're not. You're sort of justifying where everything is going so that it then gets dispersed or, as voted on by the members to be used for, say, for example, capital, improvements or those kinds of things. So it's not where it's going towards an owner, like a sole proprietor, or towards a corporation that would be two stockholders, like Jeanne had said earlier, that are not really involved in the business. It's going directly back to the members, either in forms of discounts or some other fashion.
Okay, cool. So we've run out of time for this hangout, but I'd like to ask if you have any last words that you'd like to share, either to encourage people to investigate more or be part of your cooperative at the same time, or any other aspect that you find relevant sharing.
Well, I would like to say, first off, that I think that workers are under this sort of umbrella of thinking that says they have to be managed, that they have to have someone who sort of dominates over them and tells them this is what you have to do. And there's this fear to really own your own company or be part of your own, wealth creating organization. And I think that that's been handed down to us, and I think we need to remove that chain of and burden of thinking that you have to only be working for someone, that you can work for yourself, and that you can work together with other people. And it's really just a matter of willpower to say, yeah, I can do this, and I'm willing to listen, and I think that there's good ideas out there, and I don't have to do it alone. It's really hard to start a business alone. And to do it when you've got 12 other people that have your back is an incredible experience. So I would encourage anyone who has a good idea and has a couple of friends to consider, putting it all on the table and start planning.
Awesome, and thank you very much for sharing all of this. It's very inspiring, and this is also a comment from Jogan Barrientos. He's saying, thank you, I really enjoyed this. Thank you for watching, Jogan. Jeanne, any last words?
I just think that's great what you just said, Tess, because we do have to re-educate ourselves that we're not born into an authoritarian, we don't have to live in an authoritarian construct. We can become our own authorities, and this is what the cooperative movement is proposing and has proven successful, that members can operate for the benefit of themselves and the benefit of society. So that's very cool. It's a new model of democracy.
Yeah, common well-being doesn't have to be mutually exclusive to making profit and being part of capitalism at the same time. It is actually, as I said earlier, an injection of life into capitalism. So thank you very much, both of you, for being here and for your time sharing.
Thanks, Marlen. That's great. Thanks, Tess.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Great.
We did as well. And to you, the viewer, thank you for watching as well. We will see you next week with another live Google Hangout. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
Bye.